4 home wins in the quarterfinals, and they've set up a couple of spicy semi-finals. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. Quarterfinals done. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about what happened in those quarterfinals. Obviously, not going into too much detail. If you want full reviews of any of those games, I've got them up on the channel, so go and check those out. What this one is, we're just going to summarize each of the games, talk about where that leaves the teams, and quickly have a look at the semi-finals as well. And then later on in the week, we will do a full preview of the semi-finals as usual. And I'd just like to say now as well, if you wouldn't mind, if you like my stuff, hit that like button, post a comment, hype, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. It really does help the channel out, and I'm always very appreciative of anyone who's able to do that. Or if you don't want to do that, just taking your time to look at watch my stuff is more than enough for me anyway. Okay, so let's get into things and see how the weekend went. So first thing to say is it was 4 home wins in the quarterfinals. Thought maybe there was a couple of teams that had genuine chances in their respective quarterfinals. One of those teams I think turned up and the other one didn't. And talking about those as Connacht and the Lions, and I think most people can tell which one is which with those descriptors. So we're going to start with a Friday game. So Glasgow Warriors 33, Connacht 21. So scoring, we start off, Connacht get a perfect start. Dean Prendergast gets over for a try within 5 minutes, but about 5 minutes later, Schickerling is over for the Warriors, and that's converted by George Horn, and we're all square, and we stay all square until half time, despite Sam Lilo going to the bin on 14 minutes. Warriors weren't able to take advantage of that. But then we go into the second half. Kyle Steyn, who had a superb game, gets over for the first of his 2 tries within 5 minutes of the second half starting. And then 10 minutes later, Josh Mackay, who is, he's a brilliant, I think, utility player that kind of moves around the Glasgow backline, depending on which of their star backs is injured, but the guy always does a fantastic job, and he did it again in this game. He gets over for their 3rd try. Both of those tries were converted by Horn as well. So Warriors at that point then have a 14-point lead. Then Connacht start putting on pressure. They get over to Dave Heffernan. Alex Samuel goes to the bin for the Warriors after that as well, but Connacht back within a score. Then we have Gunter Beju scored a brilliant try. He breaks the line and shows some nice footwork. Has the strength as well to kind of resist the tackle and goes over to score as well. I think he's a young guy. I've seen him a few times now for Glasgow. Been impressed from every time I've seen him as well. And I'm thinking that he's maybe gonna have in the not too distant future be part of and I don't just mean training, actual part of Scotland squads in terms of Six Nations, etc. Because the guy really does look like the real deal. And yeah, as I said, been impressed every time I've seen him. He's not just a sometimes with second rows they just have kind of one dimension to them, whether that's they're good at the line out or it's just a big lump of a guy. But he's strong, but also he's got that athleticism as well. So, and he's one of those type of guys you could see maybe switching between 5 and 6. So yeah, definitely I think one for the future for Scotland. And great cameo off the bench from him in this one as well. So Warriors kind of re-establishing their lead there. Not too long later though, Finlay Bealham gets over for Connacht and brings them back within kind of touching distance again. And 5 minutes to go, then Kyle Steyn kind of settles the matter when he goes over for Glasgow's 5th try. So, Connacht giving a good count to themselves. They've had, it's tempting to say a decent season. I would say they've had a decent second half of their season because they were pretty poor in the first half. They were down there, with the likes of Edinburgh, Sharks, Ospreys, Benetton, etc. The teams that never really threatened the top 8 this season. And Connacht were kind of in that mix, that kind of lower table, everyone kind of scrapping between themselves and trying to get some momentum. And then after, in January, they win their first Interpro against Ulster, first Interpro for more than 2 years. And then suddenly find a massive streak of form. Got to give a lot of credit to the coaches there, especially Stuart Lancaster, head coach, in bringing that consistency to them, and that got them into the top 8, in 8th place. But this game, a little bit too far for them. But certainly there are signs, that if they can build on what they produce in the second half of this season, next season, they certainly are looking like a team on the up. Glasgow, for me, the best attacking performance we've seen from them in a long time. Crisp passing, players running onto the ball, at pace, stretching the defence, looking for holes, and backs and forwards mixing together well. They also got line out went really well. Their maul off the back of that line out went well, and they were putting pressure on in terms of getting close to the line on the back of that as well. So lots of positives for Glasgow, and certainly looking a lot better than they have been in the URC recently. And I think just got to give them kind of that pep in the step that they might need for, what is going to be a very tough semi-final for them. But the final score, Glasgow Warriors 33, Connacht 21 there. And again, if you want to, go and check out the longer review on the channel. Next then, we have the second quarter-final. So that was Vodacom Bulls 45, Munster 14. This a bit more of a straightforward affair for the Bulls. Start off after 5 minutes, Papier over to score. Then Curtly Arendse a few minutes after that, and Bulls look like they're in complete control. Then they take the foot off the gas and they let Munster back in the game. Munster respond, Jack O'Donoghue and then Alex Nankivell both going over. All those tries were converted, and only a penalty from Andre Pollard keeping the Bulls ahead at that point, 17 points to 14. And then just before halftime, then the Bulls kind of get the composure back. They start kind of bossing the game again. And Johan Grobler goes off the back of a maul over to score. He's one of those players, there's a few hookers like him around that have that ability to get over from close range, and he's really, really good at it, and he proved that again today. And then Cameron Hanekom, who's had a bit of an injury hit season this year, having kind of burst onto the scene. Last year, the year before? It feels like he's been around a couple of years at least, but yeah, this year kind of disrupted a bit, but he gets over just before half time to really establish, that lead for the Bulls. Then into the second half, then Papier with his second, and then Jacobs with the Bulls' 6th try, with 20 minutes to go. And yeah, Munster, it felt like they put a lot of effort into getting back to 14-all, and then after that, then they just didn't look like they were up to the task, honestly. And we can talk about injuries, but you look at every team at this stage, there's lots of injuries. Munster are missing a lot of key players, but I guess it depends on the team, right? Some teams, that is an opportunity for young players to be brought through and to really prove their mettle, and then you reap the benefit of that in the next season. But Munster honestly looked disjointed, even in their run to finishing 5th place. And yeah, it's an interesting one because, as I said previously, they finished the second highest of the Irish provinces, only behind Leinster. But certainly, if you look at media and fans, etc., the talk is that they've had a poor season compared to every other Irish province. And for me, it's certainly been a mixed season for them. But I think the main thing for me with Munster is there's no certainty over over the coaching ticket overall, whether it's Macmillan as head coach, and then you have, announcements of coaches leaving, etc. It never feels like it's settled there. And I think that's one of the big issues for Munster, whether they're going to go with Macmillan or whoever, and other ancillary coaches as well. It feels like they've got to get a team of coaches in there that are there for 3 to 5 years, and having that, because you look at Murphy at Ulster, and you look at Lancaster over in Connacht, and you feel that there is that stability there, and that they've had an impact, that their teams are created in their image. It takes a while, obviously, for coaches to bed in. But with Munster, it feels like coaches only betting in, and suddenly there's talk of that they're leaving. So I think that's certainly something Munster have to work on. But the Bulls, they've been one of the form teams coming into the playoffs, and they performed like it as well. Some really good performance from them. Again, if you want full review, go check that one out on the channel. But yeah, the Bulls, I think, have been excellent for the past couple of months. I think they've got the best form of any team left in the competition over that period. I think they've won the last 7 on the bounce now. So winning is a habit, and it means that they're going to be there or thereabouts, I think, in their semi-finals. And if you want a team to make a final, the Bulls have the most experience in this competition. Not so much with lifting the trophy, but it feels like that's something that's going to come with time for them. You can't, it's, I guess, kind of similar to Leinster getting to the Champions Cup finals. You keep thinking they can't keep getting to the final and not winning. They've got to win one at some point, and feel the same way about the Bulls. Doesn't mean that's going to be this year, but if you keep putting yourself, giving yourself the chance to appear in a final, you are going to win one of them. Well, Vodacom Bulls 45, Munster 14, the final score there. On to the next one then, and it was DHL Stormers 44, Cardiff 21. And Cardiff, honestly, given a decent account of themselves in this one. They were against the Stormers team, who really looked on it. Sacha Feinberg and Gamazulu, amazing player, scored a try in this one, but seemingly injured himself in that try. So it's going to be interesting to see if we see him again, in the semi-final, or is the season over, or if the Stormers makes it to the final, can he get back if he's going to miss the semi-final? So lots of questions about that. But Cardiff actually make a decent start to this game. We have Cam Winnett goes in. That was when Cardiff were under massive pressure from the Stormers, and then score a breakaway try through Cam Winnett. Johan Lloyd as the extras, and they're leading, but it doesn't take long for Stormers to hit back. Andre Hugo Venter gets over Feinberg and Gamazulu as the extras, ties things up, and then a few minutes later, Makunu is over for the second try. That's converted as well. So now they got a 7-point lead. And Then Leon's ass finishing very well. I think he scored it wide, right? And Feinberg and Gomezulu, a brilliant conversion for that as well. So they've got a decent lead going into halftime, 14-point lead there. And, at that point as well, you had Kieran Arizati in the bin. And during that period, I'm pretty sure Cardiff had to go down to 13 players, was it? I'm trying to remember, because I think there was something like that. I'm trying to remember what happened. They were certainly at 14 at that stage, or maybe I'm mixing up with another game, because so many games run around my head now from the weekend. I know someone went down to 13 players because they had a prop in the bin. It might have been them. Oh no, it was it when? Yeah, it was when Sebastian went to the bin in the second half that they went down I knew it was something to do with Cardiff. Yeah, so Sebastian went to the bin in the second half, having come on for Azarati. And then they went down to 13 then because we went to uncontested scrums. But Stormers were all over them in the scrum anyway, so they were probably better off with uncontested, even with one less player. And Stormers, they come into the game having won 60 penalties in the scrum, and I think the next best were Stormers, were either 40 or 42, Bulls, 40 or 42, and I think the Sharks had 50 odd, but they weren't in the quarterfinals. Stormers on top in the scrum, in the set piece overall. Into the second half, then Tame Basham gets over for a try for Cardiff, stirring a little bit, but then we have that Fernberg and Gomezulu showing great pace to finish for Stormers, but then, as I said, seemed to have gotten injured in the act of scoring. And then we have James Botham again, Cardiff not going away, scoring a third try for Cardiff. And then it's only really the last kind of 15 minutes you have Paul de Villiers and JJ Kutza both getting over for Stormers to put a little bit of gloss on the score. And I think as a I would say, like when Matty put the penalty over on 69 minutes, it kind of, I think, showed, the respect Stormers had for the Cardiff performance as well. At that point, not really feeling like they obviously had a decent cushion, but feel like, an extra 3 points just to make it an extra score for Cardiff was important. And then the game ended with Matty adding, another 3 points with the clock in the red as well. But very good performance from Stormers. Cardiff had a decent season. The core of the team is still fairly young. They obviously have some experience in there as well. But, they really have taken a step forward this year compared to last year, because last year they had a decent start to the season, but then fell away and missed out on the playoffs. This year, very good start to the season. They had a dip in form, but then they were able to come back, in the kind of the last third to a quarter of the regular season to, get themselves, establish themselves in that top 8. So that's really good. So overall, I think they'll feel like they've had a very good season. Next year will be interesting now with, Champions Cup and, URC trying to remain in that top 8. So we'll see how they juggle those. But it's definitely a step forward for Cardiff. And I've said before, in terms of the boost that you get for Champions Cup, it's important to make it a repeatable thing, that, you're not just having the odd year in the Champions Cup. You look at the teams who are getting Champions Cup every year, and you can see how those teams are coming on. Now, obviously, they're getting Champions Cup every year because they're very good teams in the first place, but you do see progression in those players as well. And the example I would point to is look at Glasgow in the pool stages this year in the Champions Cup. complete, step up from any other performance or appearance they've had in the Champions Cup. So this one then, DHL Stormers 44, Cardiff 21, the final score. Okay, and then we go on to the last quarterfinal. That was Leinster 59, Fidelity Securedrive Lions 10. So Leinster get off to a good start. Then they kind of lose their way a little bit. Lions come back a bit at them, and then Leinster, in the second half, just put the foot down, and the Lions can't live with them. So Leinster get over twice in the first 15 minutes, Dan Sheehan and Hugo Keenan. And then, as I said, Lions still have to soak up a bit more pressure until they start, the last kind of 10 minutes or so of the half, they start really coming forward. And Van Vick gets over for the first of his 2 tries. And, making it a bit nervy for Leinster at half time. I think it was 14-5 at the break, right? And we had at that stage Thomas Clarkson in the bin as well for Leinster. Then into the second half, or no, just before half time, sorry, Leinster get over to James Ryan to just give them a bit more breathing space going into the break. Then into the second half, then Scott Penny with Leinster's 4th try, and Leinster back with that kind of double tap that we've seen from them a lot in previous season and not so much this season. Scored try just before halftime and just after halftime, and turn what was a tight game into a decent margin from them, and making it so that the opposition have to chase the game, and therefore creating more space for Leinster. Sam Prendergast, who I thought had a very good game in running the attack, then gets over for Leinster's 5th try. Still, we didn't see much of him on defence because the Lions did not throw all that much in attack. So those question marks, I think, are still there. But basically what I said in the long review was that he reminded everyone of the really good points of his game, and there is a lot of upside with this guy. Then Gus McCarthy gets over for Leinster's 6th try. Van Vick then in for his 2nd. But Leinster keep adding the tries on. So Jimmy O'Brien then in for another one. And, James Lowe was right beside him, looking devastated that he didn't look for him to pass, because Lowe was looking to break the Leinster try scoring record that he held equally with Shane Horgan. But then a few minutes later, Lowe does get over for that record-breaking try, and then is able to add another try as well, right into death as well, to give himself a little breathing space in terms of anyone in the future who will come along and eventually break that record as well. Just make that one more harder for them, at least at this stage. Okay, so overall from Leinster, very good for me. Certainly the second half and the beginning of the first half, the only quibble I would have with them is that kind of second quarter. So from minute 20 to just before 40, when they kind of woke up and got to try with James Ryan. Other than that, it was a very good performance from them. But you feel like, now we're going into semi-final, that it's got to be a full 80-minute performance from them, that they can't have that kind of slip up where they let opposition back into the game, because I think a team maybe with a bit more quality than the Lions, but also more experience at this level, would have taken maybe a little bit more out of that, and maybe got themselves back on terms, or even had a slight lead coming up to half time there as well. So that's certainly something Leinster have to work on. But on attack, very very like Glasgow in terms of the running lines were good, whether it was someone who was going to receive the pass or a dummy runner. Crisp passing, playing on the edge. There were a few times when Prendergast almost threw intercepts as well. Line's not as aggressive as maybe other teams will be in defence in terms of coming up into the line and looking for those intercepts as well. So that's certainly one to look at. But, forwards carrying well, interplay with the backs very good as well. So lots of positives, I think, for Leinster. Set piece was okay. Still, I think need work on that. But yeah, overall, a decent performance from Leinster. Leinster 59, Fidelity Securedrive Lions 10, the final score there. So those are the 4 quarterfinals. So that gives us then this semi-final lineup. So Glasgow Warriors, number 1 seed against Vodacom Bulls, number 4 seed. And Leinster, number 2 seed against DHL Stormers, number 3 seed. So Glasgow Warriors, so those times there are my local times in Spain. So if you're in Ireland or the UK, take an hour off that. So, 2:30 kickoff for Glasgow versus the Bulls, and that's going to be in Murrayfield. Still don't know where the final is going to be if the Warriors, make it to the final. And then Leinster, a 5:30 kickoff against the DHL Stormers at the Aviva Stadium. Okay, so just looking at that semi-final lineup, we obviously got the top 4 teams in the league, and looking over the season, it's hard to argue with the fact that they were the best 4 teams over the season as well. Other teams had periods where they were looking good, the likes of Ulster, the Lions, etc., Cardiff, when they were kind of up in that kind of top 3 or 4. But yeah, these were the teams that, obviously over the 18 games, were a little bit better than some of the others. And it was just a little bit, because it was so tight in the league this year. But you look at them and you look at all the experience there, every one of these teams has been to a final. 3 of these 4 teams have lifted the trophy previously as well. And the thing about the Bulls as well is if this is the year that the Bulls are going to win the lift the title for the first time, they're absolutely going to have to, they're going to have done it the hard way, because they beat previous champions Munster in the quarterfinal. In the semi-final, if they beat Glasgow, then they'll have beat another previous champion, and whoever then they go on and face in the final, if they beat them, they'll have beaten previous champions in the final as well. So, basically, quarterfinal, semi-final, final, they'll have to beat previous champions. So you can't really get more difficult than that. But, Bulls have shown previously that, reputation doesn't matter too much for them, that they can produce those performances. They can do it away from home as well. They'll have no fear going to Glasgow. And I think the Stormers, similarly with Leinster as well, you look at some of the teams that made the top 8, and a few of them you would think if they'd gotten through to the semi-finals, then home advantage certainly would have weighed a bit more than it does, I think, in these games. It looks like a fantastic semi-final matchup. I hope that all teams show up. I'm not the type, obviously a Leinster fan, but I'm not the type of Leinster fan that's hoping that Stormers go to the Aviva and have an absolute nightmare and don't perform at all and Leinster win easily. I'd rather, even if it means that Leinster lose, that the Stormers turn up and they perform. But I'm obviously hoping that Leinster perform as well, and then let the best team win. Why not? Like, that's what rugby is about, right? That's why we enjoy watching it. I'm sure there are people who enjoy their team just absolutely hammering everyone else. But for me, that's not the rugby I enjoy. I enjoy the ones where your team really have to work for it, and where both teams just leave everything out there. And I'm hoping that that's what we get in these 2 semi-finals. They certainly, on paper, look like that's what they're going to be. But we've got a week now to find out if that's what's actually going to happen. But as I said, we'll have that preview later on in the week, and as next weekend gets closer as well, I'm just going to get more and more excited for what looked like two absolutely amazing matchups in the semi-finals.